Hello and welcome to All Things Marvelous. I'm John Paul and today we're going to be making this in Blender. Yes, it's a quite easy geometry node setup. It's a looping animation and it's got a lot of variation within it that you should be able to make a lot of your own cool stuff. I will say off the bat that this isn't my creation. I saw this on the default cube channel, which I'll link in the description below, but I thought I'd show you my own version of it and how to do the looping animation. So with that said, let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we are in cycles and that we're on the normal supported set and that we're using GPU compute if you're using a graphics card. One thing I would say that I've noticed recently, if we can change the noise threshold to 0.1 and boost up the max sample to 500, this should help us with the render times quite a lot. So the first thing we're going to do is we need a new window to create the geometry nodes in. So we're just going to pull something down from the top here and create a window down there, and we change this over here to the geometry node editor. That shouldn't be there, but okay. So with this here selected like that, we're going to click new, and that's going to give us the geometry node setup, which we can zoom into. And the first thing we're going to do is delete the input geometry because we don't need that. And the first thing they're going to need is a circle. So we're going to use a curved circle for this. So if you press Shift and A, you will see we are going to go the curve primitives and we go curve circle. And if we plug that in, you will see that we now have a circle curve in the display. So what we need to do from here is we need to distribute some points along this curved circle. So we use that, we use instance on points. If we go to instances here, instant on points, that there, and we drop that in, and the circle has disappeared because it's now a set of points rather than something visual that we can see. So to rectify that, we need something to be able to see them, and we're going to use a cube. So we're going to bring in another mesh primitive from the menu, and we're going to bring in a cube. And if we connect that cube to the instance, we will see that we now have a set of cubes on the different points around the circle. So a few things we need to do to adjust this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the size, and I'm going to bring that down to 0.1 instead of 1, so we can see what's going on, and we're going to bring the resolution up to 137. That should give us a nice overlapping spread of geometry that we can play around with. So after that, a quick couple of things to do to the cube just before we move on. We are going to set a subdivision surface and a set shade smooth, which should help us later with our animation to give us some nice patterns and things like that. Okay, so what we also want to do is we want to align these so that they're following around the circle, and the way that we do that is by using a thing called tangent. Curve tangent is giving you the position of each of the instances and the direction of them in correlation to the actual circle. So if we go to search and go to curve tangent, if we go to just type in tangent, get the curve tangent there, and then we want to align to Euler. Align Euler to vector, there we go. And we take the tangent and plug that into the vector, and then we take the rotation and we plug that into the rotation of the cube. Now a few things to check to make sure. I think for mine, if you align it to the Y, that should work for us. Okay, so now what we're going to do is create the looping bit of the animation that makes the cubes constantly rotate around their axis. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to create a rotate axis, rotate instances, sorry. I'm going to drop that in there, and if you see, if we come to the rotation and along the Y, because remember we aligned it to the Y, we should be able to see, if we zoom in, all of them moving around the axis like that. That's what we want. Okay, let's put that back to nothing. So the way we want to control this is we want to have each one of them turning around, but them going not at the same time, them individually turning one after another. And the way we do that is by giving the setup 2 bits of information. The first bit of information we're going to give them is the scene time in seconds. So we take a scene time and we can use the seconds output from that, and then we're going to use a index. Now the index is going to give us a number based on each of the instances, each of the cubes, and it's going to have its own unique index. So we're going to take that index, we're going to use a math node, type in a math node there, and we're going to set that to multiply, and we're going to take the index and stick it in the top there, and then we're going to duplicate that math node and add it. So we're going to take the seconds, what the time in seconds as it goes along in the top, and then we're taking the number of the index in the bottom, and we're going to use that to control the Y. And to be able to do that, we need to be able to combine it, make it into a vector. So what we're going to do is we're going to use combine XYZ, and we're going to take the value into the Y, and then use the vector that comes out and turn that, put that into the rotation. Now what we should have is, if we click play, we should see that they're all turning around on the axis, and they should be just offset from each other using the index information. Okay, so a nice quick and easy geometry node setup. Let's clean this up while we've got some time. Quickly put these together. Okay, so that's the node setup that we have. So to make the animation work, the whole animation of the seconds and the turning, to make sure that it loops, is all dependent on the frame rate, and our frame rate is 30 FPS, which is what yours should be set to standard. As you see, if it's not, please go and change it to 30, and with that we need to set the animation length to 188 frames. What this should give us is a perfectly looped animation, as you can see, so it's not jumping. So if I see I go to 190, you'll see that it jumps or stalls. So if you set it to 188, that should give us a perfectly looped animation using the geometry node setup. The next couple of things we're going to do are, we are going to animate the curve getting bigger and smaller. So the first thing we're going to do is we set the marker to 1. We press this button just here, and we're going to come over to curve circle, and we'll press I on the radius at 1 meter, which will give us a keyframe at the start. Then we're going to come to about frame 90, and we're going to set the radius to 0.5 and press I again. Now from this moment, what we can do is, if we click a couple of times in the middle and select the first keyframe, if you press Alt and C to copy it and move to the end of the animation, and press Control V, that will then copy that position over at the end. And now what we should have is an animation that moves in and moves out like that. Now if yours is doing what mine is, which is going very stiff on its transitions, what you need to do is you need to select all of the points and move the interpolation mode to Bezier. And what this will do is will really smooth out the bounce, So it should like just get to the edge and smoothly move back into the center. So now we have that. You say, why does it not look like the video? Well, the few things that we need to change to make it pop out and be unique like the video are, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give it a tiny bit of extra length on the x-axis. So if you hold down shift on the cube, and we're going to move up the x-axis to slowly move it out to get this sort of pattern like that. And as you can see, it's looking a lot more like it is in the video. And then from here, the next thing you do, now this is the magic number basically. This is the thing which makes all of this turn into very unique and beautiful abstract geometry patterns. So using this, if we press shift and move this up, you can see it slowly changes into all these different patterns that we can move around and change. So if we go back into the crease, and we can move these out a little bit like that, make it a bit thinner, and we can also boost up the resolution so we can have more as they go around. Now one thing I found when I was making this is you have to play around. If you say for instance want a pattern like this, there will be a join somewhere here which you can fix or edit using the resolution. So if you shift over here, you can see slowly, if you see how these come out, and you can select it so you find they line up together. So you say something like that basically is how you'd want it. So when you click play, you get that very nice Mobius strip animation. So if we go back to the original values, I think this was on 137, and these were 0.1, 0.1, and then this is 2.9. Okay, so now we have what I had in the video, and as you can see, it moves in and out just like the animation. Okay, so a few last bits to do to clean up the scene. So we're going to come over to the camera, and what I need you to do is, if you type in the next set of values, so if we come to camera, you select its properties here, what we're going to do is we're going to set the location to 0, minus 3.6, and 1.2. Ooh, 1.2 with an angle of 71 and then 2 zeros. We also want to change the camera to orthographic and set that to about 2.3. Now if we look through the camera, that should give us what we're after, but it's not square, so we need to come up to the resolution, and we need to make it 10. I went for 1080 by 1080. You can go up a little higher if you wanted a higher resolution. So that should give us a square. So if we come back out of this, the next thing we need to do is add a plane. So you go mesh, let's shift and A, mesh plane, and if we click the N key, we'll see we'll bring up the information tab, which tells us all the dimensions for the cube, and in here we are going to enter 3 meters by 10 meters on the Y. So 3 meters on the X, 10 meters on the Y. If we come back to the camera, we should see that it's all fitting in the view. So we can also, if we just grab the plane from here and we can move it down, as you can see, it's slowly revealing the geometry underneath it, and that should give us a good setup for the camera. Okay, the next thing to do is the light. It's 2.4 on the X, 1 on the Y, 1.9 on the Z, then we have 65 on the X, 20 on the Y, and 130 on the Z. And if we click to the type of light, it should be on point at the moment. We want to move it over to spot and take it down to 200 watt. And if we move over to the rendered view, that should give us something like this. So I think that's good for the lighting. The next thing we want to do is give it ourselves an HDRI. So if we move over to the World tab on the right here and go to Surface and click Color, we click that little tab for the color section. We want to change it to Environment Texture, and I'll link in description the HDRI that I'm using, which is a Studio HDRI, and that should give us the overall lighting that we need. So the next couple of things we need to do is just give them both a little bit of a shader. One of the techniques that I've used on the main geometry node is a bit of subsurface scattering, which gives that really nice two-tone between the edges and the center of the geometry. So we'll set that up first. So if we go into geometry nodes, if we click the cube and we go to materials, the best way I've found is just to add it to the geometry. It won't actually change the geometry, but we're going to set that within the geometry node setup. So if we just click new here and change this to the shader editor, what we can see is what we're going to do is pick the base color. I went for a nice sort of turquoise green and pulled down the brightness of it so it's a bit darker, and then I brought the subsurface scattering up to about 1.17, something like that. Now what we need to do is go back to the geometry node setup, and just before the end here we need to add a set material. So you can find it under material, go set material, and we're going to rename this green, and we can use this to select the green. And as you can see, we're already getting that very nice two-toned color from the subsurface scattering. The next thing we're going to do is add that to the plane as well. So we'll select the plane and we'll select green, but what we'll do is we'll duplicate that by clicking that little number there, and on this one, if we come back to the shader editor, what we're going to do is turn up the subsurface scattering just a little bit more and bring up the metallic so that we get a reflection. If I have a little look, so we need to bring the roughness right down, and metallic there, and then what we're going to do is we're going to move the whole plane just down a little bit like that, so we just get the reflection. And if we go for a render now, let's see how this is looking. Okay, so I think with the background plane, what I'm going to do is bring up the green a little bit so there's a bit more bright light coming through. So a few things you can do that should be good for the animation. As you can see that it's looping, it's not quite within the camera. What we can do is if we grab the camera and pull the orthographic back a little bit there, and we can also make the background. What we're going to do is actually push the background. We're going to grab it, click Y and move it forward, left a little bit, which should help us to keep this all in frame. And there we go. So a few things that you can do if you want to play around to make these things interesting are, if we come back to the geometry nodes, are the resolution, the scale and size of the actual cube itself to give yourself different bits of geometry. You can also see if you use this, and this is the magic number, if you use this multiplier, this will give you lots of different effects and ways of manipulating the geometry to give you some very interesting shapes. Okay, so hope you like this tutorial. Please like and subscribe, and let me know if you want to see more tutorials like this. But that's it for now. Okay, bye bye.